Ogi, hello there, and welcome to the Fox Den. Nistu anagok biksipidaki. I am Andrea Truejoy Fox, your host for Talks with a Fox. I'm happy you have joined me on this colorful adventure of self-discovery and lifelong learning. Throughout my journey, I have met some amazing human beings who are living inspirational and intentional lives as they fulfill their purpose and share their gifts with the world. I am excited to share these conversations with you, as well as some stories from my life as a Blackfoot woman, Nitsitabyaki, and as a teacher and artist who is navigating through this exciting and beautiful world we live in, challenges and all. So grab a tea or coffee and get ready to feel inspired as you reflect on your own exciting journey and your connection to the world. We are in this together, and there is so much for us to learn and share. Let's do this. I just want to thank you for following this wonderful journey and for connecting with Talks with a Fox on all of our social media and liking and commenting on our page. Taking care of my body is very important to me so I can continue to enjoy the health benefits of a physically active lifestyle. That's why I believe in products that help with post-workout recovery and cognitive function. Everyday Natural Products is a Washington homegrown brand that formulates everything themselves, from a wide variety of vitamin and nutritional supplements and ingredients, all healthy for humans and pets. Natural products you can feel good about taking every day. Please visit www.empstore.com. And be sure to use TWAF as a discount code for your health and wellness products today, so you too can enjoy the health benefits of everyday natural products. Okay, Tanze, and good afternoon, everybody. I am Biksipidaki Andrea Truejoy Fox, your host for Talks with the Fox, and I am super honored and just very much looking forward to having a wonderful and what will be very insightful and informative conversation for all of our listeners to take in with a very highly respectable and reputable and just a person who is truly making a difference in many of our communities and across Canada, really, which we'll hear more about. But before I continue on, I want to give a warm welcome to Brooks Arcand-Paul, who is from the Alexander First Nation in Treaty 6 territory. Tanze Brooks.
Tanse, how are you?
I'm doing well. Just really excited to talk with you. I have so much on my mind, apart from the information that you sent me, of course, Googling you and just seeing you in the media this year a lot, especially talking about very important and necessary topics and information across the country. How are you?
I'm doing well. Enjoying
Great.
the scene of Montreal out of my hotel window right now.
Love it. Beautiful. Yeah, Montreal is a wonderful city. I have you had a chance to go to check out old Montreal?
I have. I've done a few trips when I was in law school, so I've gotten to see all of Montreal. Got a tattoo here to mark my love for it, and it's a very beautiful territory to be on.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why today the hotel view is just fine for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Brooks. So I want our listeners to get to know you better and those that haven't already heard of the work you're doing. I'm sure we're going to have lots of people look things up and dig deeper. And so first of all, where you are a lawyer, and by the way, congratulations. I know you are the vice president of the Indigenous Bar Association of Canada. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yes. Wow. What a wonderful voice to represent so many incredible people who are in the trenches doing that heavy lifting around policy and law and looking into holding people accountable, essentially. What brought you to where you are? Like, why did you want to become a lawyer?
I think I've always had a desire to do something advocacy wise. I've always been an advocate, whether for myself, my family, or those people that are just like me. I'm an Indigenous queer man. You know, we are traditionally voiceless in the systems that have continued to try pressing us and our messages. And I've been very alive to all of these little things that people Uh, might not have had a voice in these systems and policies that do not reflect who they are, and protect the very sacred nature of our beings, of how important we are and to our communities. I grew up on my nation. I come from a family of my parents were divorced when I was quite young. And growing up as a queer man in a small town Alberta, you don't really get to see yourself reflected in a lot of the I guess policy, the decision making capacities around you. And from that, you come to understand that discrimination is everywhere. There's homophobia, there's fat phobia, there's racism. It just runs a gamut. And eventually you just get really tired and you want to stand up and just scream at the top of your lungs. But that's not how all these processes work. And from the beginning, I realized that I needed to get my voice out there. I needed to stand up with people who have traditionally not had their voices heard, and really try and advocate for us, for Indigenous people, for First Nations people. Um, and I think you find that in a lot of Indigenous lawyers who do practice in the area of law that I practice in, especially those First Nations lawyers, because we grow up knowing that our most important and most valuable and most sacred thing is treaty. And you start seeing that Canada doesn't view it in the same way. And I had to really turn my mind to how do I get out there? How do I actually put our position down and make the world know just how important our treaty is, but also us as Nehiyaw people, our whole worldview, our whole culture, because it took a lot for me to get to the point of really understanding and valuing my culture, who I was as a Nehiyawin. My traditional name, I didn't even use it until maybe middle of my undergrad, because I didn't really appreciate all of the things that made up me, and it really struck a chord in me. And I figured, what a better way to try and be a good advocate by being a lawyer. And going through all of these channels, I'd already known that I'd wanted to go to university right when I was quite young. I come from parents who did their bachelor's degrees. My mom's a teacher, a school teacher.
Yay!
My dad's a CEO, and he got his bachelor of business. He's working on his MBA right now. And I've always been surrounded by people who championed going through the educational system, and try to model that change that they wanted to see. And I've always had that fire burning within me, and I really didn't have any other option but to go to the University of Alberta, where both my parents went. And from there, I had to do a little bit of exploring. I didn't have the best first year. I actually got kicked out of the University of Alberta my first year, because I don't think I was ready. But that didn't deter me. I did a year of upgrading at Grand MacEwan University, and then I got back into the University of Alberta, and it's all history. I put my mind to it. Did a political science major, got a sociology minor, and at best, it was not really culturally relevant programming at all. And I think that's really where a lot of my advocacy really started, because I challenged all of my professors and met a few who really did care about what I was going through. So shout out to Professor Castro Ray and Professor Whitson, who helped foster my and helped me explore a lot of those really difficult conversations that the schools weren't really having at that time. I remember this one time, my philosophy professor, he actually had challenged me and asked me why I wasn't in the Native Studies program because they had, quote, created it for us, end quote. And having that experience really, it really ignited that passion to be a good advocate, to get out there and try to make that change. Because if there's another First Nations kid that's going to come after me or has gone through the same program, I would want to see them reflected in this too, because there's no way that you can't make relations to, in this philosophy example, making links to Hobbesian theory and utilitarianism to Indigenous perspectives. A lot of our experiences are universal. Human experiences are quite universal. And I think a lot of the professors that I was experiencing at that time didn't really understand or appreciate just how interrelated a lot of human societies function. And that's what boggled my mind. I don't know why they didn't see it. And then you start breaking it down, then you start seeing that it's all, it's rooted in racism, it's rooted in systemic issues, it's rooted in the institutions of colonialism, which are perpetuated by these universities, by the curriculum, by your high school, by the glares that you get from walking in a Shoppers Drug Mart and being followed around. So
yes,
what it comes down to, advocacy, for me, I don't really get to choose to be political, and I'm sure you do as well, Andrea, and maybe perhaps some of your listeners. As Indigenous people, we don't get to choose to be political. We have to be. It's just a part of our identity, because we're forced to. We are forced to face colonialism. We're forced to face that racism. We're forced to face these institutions that are built to basically destroy us. You don't have to look very far to see a lot of that animosity still lingering today. When the statue debates of Montreal, I'm glad that I'm in Montreal right now because I'm planning on going to see that baseless statue of Sir John A. Macdonald, because it's profound. It's a really big message, and it wouldn't have been won without tireless advocacy by not I'm not saying that I have any hand in that, but it's years of advocacy here on the ground by the Mohawk here. I think we need to be alive to the fact that we all have a responsibility in all our home territories to be advocates. And when we are born in this world and we have politics as a big part of us, we don't really get a choice but to have to be advocates. Yes. And I think it's just a natural fit for me. So to make a long story short, I think I was always born to be a lawyer. I was always born to work on these really, complex policy, complex jurisdictional stuff, because I like those puzzles. I like making the world make sense. And when it doesn't make sense, I like to make some sense. I know that's a terrible answer, but it's really what drives me. It makes me wake up every day and want to, do something. Because if I don't use my voice for positive and to make that change, then I'm really doing not only myself a disservice, but I'm also doing my Nehiyawewen people a big disservice by not using it for good.
I love that. Yes. I mean, that's always what, as a teacher, I'm encourage students to really look at is, instead of waiting for someone to speak for you, to be that person to speak for yourself. And you just beautifully articulated that we really are our own best advocates. as
Wait, yeah.
individuals and as communities. And, like I said, in introducing you, you really have such a rich way of articulating that on behalf of not only yourself, but like you said, we don't really have that choice. We do end up speaking for our communities. Sometimes I, well, I don't know if it's by being a teacher by nature or being Indigenous, Blackfoot, or maybe it's both. But yeah, I'll be in the line at a grocery store waiting, and suddenly someone strikes up a conversation with me, and then they find out where I'm from, my community, and next thing I know, I'm giving a whole historical overview of what's going on in the nation, in Canada, and then of course in our communities. And it's like, we don't. I once explained it to a group of non-Indigenous superintendents and principals. We don't get a day off, so to speak. I mean, even when we are home, we're thinking about our communities. We're thinking about the challenges that we face or what we just experienced that day. It's very taxing at times, and so. And it feels really good knowing there are people like you who are out there advocating for us. And I have much respect for you and your community that you work in with those who are your fellow colleagues, other Indigenous lawyers. And I'm so happy that there are so many of our people going into that field, because we really need it now more than ever. And like you said, as we look at the treaties and how they have not been honored, and where we are at with land claims and all of that stuff. So I wanted to ask you, as far as your role now, you are currently acting as legal counsel and director of legal affairs for your nation. And how incredible is that you've been out in the world and you accomplished a lot already, in your young years, I'll say, because you're still so youthful, Brooks. And oh my
I
gosh,
don't
it's
feel
great
it
to have
some
that.
days.
But it's great because you bring that fresh perspective, and also to come back to your nation and bring your expertise, and be able to, like you said, wake up and do what you were born to do. Are there any challenges that you see, or I should say, what are the challenges that you're recognizing within working within legal issues on reserve as opposed to off reserve?
Oh my, that's a good question. Well, there's always the big issue of capacity. A lot of our nations are, facing multiple issues every day. Just yesterday, I had about 4 different meetings on 4 very different topics that were very relevant, but it just left me drained, and that's a normal day. And I think a lot of our nations really suffer from not having that capacity, whether it's the ability to provide employment law, reviewing policies, basic contract.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to review contracts that our nation entered into for a couple decades ago, and really seeing that the lawyer that drafted it, which was our lawyer, really did a big disservice to the nation. And it's not for, it might have been something that was done at the time and it was just common practice. But now that I am reviewing, these agreements, I find that they aren't really structured in the best way. But when you have, many nations don't have in-house legal counsel. They have to rely on these, non-Indigenous lawyers who to do their work. And when you have people that aren't connected to the community and wanting to make that positive change, and I'm not trying to say that non-Indigenous lawyers can't do the work. They certainly can, and there are some really phenomenal lawyers in the field that are working very hard for communities. But they don't get that same sense of responsibility that I think I do have with my community.
Yes.
I'm very proud of my nation. We've accomplished a lot in our 100 years of being in existence. But we've also lost a lot at the same time. And a lot of that comes down to the strictures of the Indian Act. So the paternalism that's rooted in that very awful piece of legislation, which I'm working on dismantling, by the way,
Yeah.
slowly but surely. I think most of us are out there trying to find ways on removing that piece of legislation, whether through our own inherent right, which I'm a big proponent of always exercising, because I want to talk about the law here really quickly, because it's really important to highlight this, that courts, since this country was, quote, founded, end quote, have been saying that Indigenous sovereignty and self-government has always existed. You go as early as back as the Lovelace, sorry, not Lovelace. It's a decision in Quebec. I don't know the top of my head. I think it's Woolworth. Either way, it's a decision that comes out of Quebec, and what it ended up saying was that Indigenous self-government and sovereignty had pre-existed Canada's formation, and then you have subsequent decisions as recent as last year that identify this, that have identified, or Woolridge, that's what it's called, Woolridge, that has identified that Indigenous peoples have always had this ability to govern ourselves, not in the sense of agency, not in the sense of us being able to make decisions. It's that that aspect, that jurisdictional aspect of being able to make decisions was never signed away, never given up, never an inkling of us saying, you know what, we are going to give that over to Canada. We're going to give that over to the provinces. Not at all. And I think we need to keep reminded of that fact, that even if sometimes we lose that spark, or that understanding of that, the fact that we can do that, even Canada recognizes that we can do that. And we're at that point. We're at a critical point in our history, in our future, to be able to move forward and to put in place these governance mechanisms to really make decisions for ourselves, and by ourselves, and getting away from that nasty paternalism and colonialism that has been created by Canada's oldest piece of legislation, which is the Indian Act.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, okay, for those who are maybe new to these, I know there's actually a text on it, what you should know, something along the lines of, I think it's 21 facts or something like that you should know about the Indian Act. But in a small, or however you want to do it, just can you give a snapshot of what the Indian Act is exactly?
Yeah, for sure. So the Indian Act, like I said, is the oldest piece of legislation in Canadian books. So what it was intended to do, and I'm glad that we had that already a discussion, that I'm going to go look at the remove Sir John A. Macdonald statue, because he was the one that was his brainchild. And we are living with this race-based piece of legislation, and that's exactly what it is. It's a recognition that it's a certain class of people, a certain race of people are governable under this one piece of legislation. So it does things right from identifying who can be a status Indian under the law. It goes down to how property can be devised on death, so like wills and power of attorney and stuff of that nature. It deals with things like chief and councils, the governance systems, being able to make certain laws or bylaws for very specific things, like random little things like beekeeping. Like it has that much specificity. It's a large piece of legislation that does so much damage and undermines Indigenous peoples so much that the 21 facts, there's way more. Every little clause in there is just so deleterious and dangerous to Indigenous, I wouldn't even just say sovereignty, just existence. It's killing our people, because that jurisdictional divide that exists between Canada So let me bring it back. Let's go right down to where this piece of legislation came from. It goes right back to the papal bulls from the church, from the Royal Roman Catholic Church. So what the papal bulls basically did was recognize that Canada was founded on this doctrine of discovery, that this idea that, Munyao people, white people came over here, Europeans came over here, and they're like, oh, we discovered this land, even though there were societies living here and thriving, and that existed here, and would not, if it were not for those people living here, those Europeans might not have may not have lasted through a winter. And then from that doctrine of discovery, you keep flowing down. You go down to the Royal Proclamation, which makes it's this assertion of from 1763 that the king recognized that lands for Indians would be reserved. So it was what really started the whole motion of Europeans thinking that they could govern over Indigenous peoples because they quote owned the land that they found them on. And then from the Royal Proclamation, you go down to the British North American Act, which created Canada in 1867. It's also called the Constitution Act of 1867. And shortly after that, we have the Indian Act. It's, like I said, the oldest piece of Canadian legislation still in force today. As we go down and filter past that, we look at the Constitution Act of 1982, which I have elders on certain sides of my community that do not view the Constitution Act as having force and effect on us because our treaties supersede that and our governance system supersede that. But even in the Constitution Act, as positive as the Constitution Express, which went across Canada by Indigenous folks, to get our Section 35 rights enshrined in there, and then the the Native Women's Association of Canada also arguing for gender rights for Indigenous women. Those are very important pieces. But even then, that's still Canada saying that they have jurisdiction over us. And it goes back to that Constitution Act of 1867, where the split was further entrenched into Canadian law and why we have the Indian Act today. 9124 of the Constitution Act really gives, Canada this idea that they can govern Indigenous people. And it's rooted in all of these little nuanced pieces of ideology that Indigenous people don't have the ability to make decisions for ourselves. And then it just filters down. It goes down to like the Natural Resources Transfer Act, the Multiculturalism Act, citizenship or immigration. Like it goes all down to this idea that Canada has some kind of right rooted in paternalism and colonial principles such as white supremacy. It's so large, and this idea that we don't have agency has been so deeply entrenched in all of our the legislation, in our thinking. Sometimes I find it very difficult that when I was in law school, I had to shift my mind to recognize and really start hammering home that treaty is important. But what is more important is our agency, our ability to enter into that treaty, that self-governing, that sovereignty that we've never given away is rooted in our ability to make treaty. And that's more important. That comes from the Creator. That comes through our natural laws. That comes through things like Wokotuin and Wichiroin, our traditional practices, our legal mechanisms. And it's really heartwarming to see that we are starting to make that shift. I think, when we're looking at all of these prophecies that have been made, if you're going to follow Anishinaabeg prophecy, the eighth fire, I think we're reaching that point, and I think the prophecies are starting to come true, and we're starting to get back to that. We have almost 300 years of treaty making in this country. And we've just now started to recognize, well, I shouldn't say that. I think we've always recognized it, but we now have the, I guess, the political acumen, if you will, to be able to stand up and say, hey, no, you know what? We've always had this right. And we are going to, have our lawyers, we're going to have our teachers, we're going to have our scholars that are going to be able to articulate exactly what that means. And I think for a
Yes.
long time, we haven't had that. And now we do. And we're still using Munya language, we're using Napiaki language. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, we're getting our point across, and they're starting
Yes.
to see that. They're starting to kind of get it. And we have a lot more work ahead of us. This is just the beginning, but I'm really excited for, just being able to push those boundaries, because for the longest time we've been locked in these confines of paternalism and colonialism and racism and white supremacy. And we're starting to really see a renaissance of our ways, of our being, of our nationhood.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about all of these historical intricacies and complexities of Canada and First Nations, Indigenous peoples, I just have to say, wow, we are really a resilient people, because when you think of everything that we've been through, and we're still going through it in 2020, and yet we're still here. And like you said, we are in positions, moving into positions, and re-empowering ourselves to reclaim ourselves through land, through language, through culture, through our natural laws. Are you seeing certain communities off reserve respect, or certain processes, even maybe in the justice system, starting to acknowledge or even apply natural law?
I think that happens at the nation level, and I think we're doing a really good job at. I'm not going to say revitalize, because I don't think they went away. I think we're starting to assert them a lot better. I think that the rest of society, so I'm going to say Canadian society, because that's where we are. I'm going to say unfortunately found. But we're starting to assert that, and it's really beautiful to see, because it's going to change the way that we relate to each other, and it's going to mean not just relying on these centuries of poverty that Canada has kept us in. Because don't forget, like, Canada really just wants to see us all dead. That's the
Mm-hmm.
whole point of the Indian Act. That was the whole point of residential school. It's the whole point of the child welfare system. And my late cousin, we had to reschedule this podcast multiple times, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really heart wrenching to see genocide right in front of me in real time. Just seeing my cousin, who grew up through the system, the child welfare
Mm.
system, lost her mother at a young age. Um, I, you really, it's really hard to really not be disheartened by the fact that Canada doesn't view our ways of doing things in the same way that we view our ways of doing things, because these systems aren't made for us. They're made to keep us down. They're made
Yes.
to keep us powerless, because we have, in Canada's eyes, we have to be. They need us to be weakened so they can exploit our territories. They can exploit our lands. They can break our treaties that we have with with the mockingbird or the blue jay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's things like that, and our natural laws are so deeply ingrained with us that sometimes we don't think we have them within us. But they're simple things about, such as like humility. In Cree, humility is a big part of natural law, and when you start applying that to your relationships, to the way that you relate to the earth. You don't go out and you don't pollute, or you don't treat a wasp with vitriol. You treat it as another being, because it's another being in our world, and we need to respect that. And I think once we start moving into, continuing to practice that, and actually put them in, I don't want to say enshrined, because in my culture we're not supposed to write down our laws, and natural
Mm-hmm.
law is a
Yes.
big part of that. And you just have to learn, you just have to live it. And
Yes.
I think we're starting to see a lot of people really living it, and we're starting to see a lot of beautiful things coming out of it. Professor out of University of Alberta did a really great piece, Darcy Lindbergh, on beautiful Creenus. That's kind of what the rough translation, mio nehiyawewin, and what it really is that a lot of our ceremony is a way of sharing those laws and getting back to understanding how our ceremonies kind of guide us through our walk through on the earth, is really going to change the way that we operate. And I would like to see a lot of that ceremony being incorporated into a lot of the way that we do things. I'm not saying that I want the child and family welfare system to adopt our laws, because that's not what they're meant to do. What it's meant to
Mm-hmm.
do is get back to how we operate with each other, how we have our relationships, how treaty and our agency to enter into treaty, and what I guess what we could refer to as our sovereignty, how our sovereignty, it really should be guiding us. And I think a lot of the time, a lot of the history that we've had with Canada, we've been told that it's not worth it. Our systems did not work, but they did work, and that was why they had to destroy them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
you can look at the Indian Act was also a tool for that. For us, they banned sun dances, and a large part of that was was retribution, was giving back to the community, giving prayers, and singing with the ancestors. And I was going through my process of doing Sundance for my first time this year, and then COVID hit, and then all like I'm still gonna do it once COVID kind of settles down. But I was starting the process of learning our laws in that ceremony, and I think that that's what we really need to get back to. And I don't think that Canada can adopt these things, but they certainly can hold up their end of the bargain that they agreed to under treaty, which is fostering this relationship, recognizing our sovereignty has always been there, because their courts are even saying it. So I know it's a long answer to that question, but I think it's really important that we get to the root that our natural laws and our processes are sacred to us, and they should always remain sacred to us. But what we need to do is recognize that our relationship to Canada and to the provinces, is going to need some kind of reciprocity between each other. And how are we going to do that? Well, recognizing our strength, recognizing our ability to protect the earth, to protect our treaties that we have with our, my friends make fun of me for calling them the environmental ancestors, but that's what they are, because
Mm-hmm.
they're living, breathing beings. The rocks are our watchers. The water. My Trish name Sîpîysis, which means little river. Our water is a living being, and one of my papers in law school was focusing on that, was recognizing that water rivers can have personhood. And in New Zealand, they've recognized that with the Wanganui. And I think in Ecuador, the Vilcabamba is also recognized as an actual body, a legal body that could be protected. And I think
Mm.
that's a beautiful exercise of our ceremonies, and being able to include our natural laws, and to include our ceremonies, and recognizing those. And sorry, friends, for if you're listening, environmental ancestors and protecting them and working them into our systems.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And yes, I mean, it's like, yeah, these are things that are still with us. And I just, oh, I'm, as you explain and share all of these definitions and these terms and histories, I'm like, where were you when I was in social studies? Because, and I just think, it would be incredible for so many of our youth to hear your voice. And I'm sure they do wherever you go and when you give talks as well. But I mean, it has to come from our own voice to be able to share the importance of these things. And you can't really teach that. That's something that
Yeah.
I'm learning about more and more, because I get asked by a lot of non-Indigenous and especially white teachers asking me, well, how do I teach this? And it really does go back to, well, we need to just continue to see the Indigenous voices representing in these different fields, whether it's in education or, everything in all the different fields that we work in and have our own knowledge practices in. And I want to I find it so inspirational how you are walking the talk. I'll say, you're as you're out there and you're representing nations and doing your part to dismantle these colonial systems that were meant to destroy us. You're also practicing that within yourself, like you said, going through your ceremonies and teaching so that you can teach others. And that's really what it's about, is being able to, what we attain is to be able to share and give it away and give it back to others. And I know that, I look at your generation of lawyers and then the next up and coming generation of lawyers. I am really inspired, and I feel really encouraged that knowing that there are going to continue to be more voices representing us, and also helping us reclaim these parts of our communities back. And yeah, I want to say kudos to you, Brooks, because you're doing such incredible work. And with that, though, comes a lot of exertion, your output, and a lot of energy. And I know for us, it's not just physical energy, it's spiritual energy, emotional energy. How do you, take care of yourself so that you can continue to do the very important work that you're doing? What are some things that, I guess wellness is the word that everybody's throwing around these days, but really, what are things that you do to keep yourself well and take care of yourself?
I'm going to make a bad joke right now. I don't, but I do. It's a constant process. I attend
Mm-hmm.
therapy. I have a really great therapist. Shout out to my therapist. She's a Cree woman, very wonderful. Incorporates a lot of spiritual stuff into my I guess my plan, if you will. I also
Mm.
hit the gym. I'm starting to learn how to do Olympic weightlifting with my roommate, and um,
Wow.
it's very difficult. I will tell you, I cry almost every single session, but it's a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
it's little things like that. It's hanging out with my family. It's making sure that I'm taking the time off that I need. If I need to sleep in one day, I sleep in one day, because my roommate's over here in my corner, and he probably will make fun of me, but I probably sleep in a lot more than I probably should. But and it's treating myself. It's making sure that
Yes.
I'm taking care of myself. It's having a bubble bath. It's lighting some
Yes.
candles, and I'll admit I like a glass of wine, and
Yeah.
as long as you're in moderation, I think making sure I'm on top of my mental health is the biggest part of making sure that I'm not abusing any of these any of these things that are legal in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
it's a constant struggle. I also struggle with eating. It's a big part of my life. I've always, like I said at the beginning, growing up with fat phobia, I was really conscious and hyper aware of the body dysmorphia that it caused me. I was teased, I was bullied growing up. That's why, I decided, I need to be an advocate for those people that might also face it. But at the same time, it is part of that mental aspect. I gained weight very quickly when my parents got divorced, and just never was able to take it off. And I think I struggle a lot of times, but I always continue working on it because I think I'm worth it. I believe that my soul is worth it. I believe that my spirit is worth it, and I just continuously work at it. And I think if I can drive anything home to anyone, any of your listeners, is that just making sure that you know that you deserve to treat yourself, to take care of yourself, whether that's going to get that pretzel at Wetzel's Pretzel, or having a boost juice, or quitting sugar for a month, which I'm doing right now, and I'm probably going to lose my mind, but it's little things like that. And
Yes.
another big part of my mental health and making sure that I am doing things that drive passion home, which is a big part of it, is volunteering. And my position as a vice president on the Indigenous Bar Association is just that. It ignites my passion. It fuels my desire to make positive change. It really does give me a sense of purpose, and also helps me wake up every morning, when I sleep in. um, but I get to do really cool things like get a Supreme Court of Canada injunction, or sorry, not injunction, intervener status for the Indigenous Bar Association in a really big Supreme Court of Canada decision that might change the face of the law here in Canada. And
Wow.
yeah, I was very
Oh.
I'm still shocked that I was able to do it. But in
Oh.
Disautel, it's a case coming up. It's going to be heard October 8th at the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And what it's about is, in loose terms, transboundary recognition of Section 35 application. So Indigenous people in Colville, so the Colville tribe of Indians in northern Washington State, came over to BC and shot I think it was a deer or an elk, and asserted Section 35 rights. I'm a little bit. I think that they were actually using it as a test case, so I'm not sure the dynamics on that. But he came over here, Disautel, and shot this elk and asserted those Section 35 rights. And the Court of Appeal, the British Columbia Supreme Court, the British Columbia Court of Appeal, and now the Supreme Court of Canada, it has heard this decision. And every single step of the way, the courts have recognized that, yes, that individual has Section 35 rights here in Canada. And that's going to be huge for, transboundary rights, for Indigenous rights,
Yes.
that conception of the colonial border. So, sorry, I'm getting all over the place, but really what I'm trying to get at is you have to have that passion. And if you don't have that passion, you're not going to be able to move forward. You're not going to be able to take care of yourself and advocate for yourself. And if you can't advocate for yourself, how can you advocate for somebody else? And to put it as RuPaul says, sorry, I'm gonna butcher this, but bear with me. If you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you gonna love somebody else? Can I get an amen?
Yes.
So
Amen.
that's really what it comes down to
Yes, I love
for
it.
me.
Love it. Oh, yeah. I mean, oh, and by the way, congratulations on, being part of that case. I'm going to look forward to hearing more about it. I wrote it down October 8th, and I'm sure we'll be hearing it as it comes up here. And yeah, I mean, like before there were borders, I always say, the before times, if you will,
Mhm.
we didn't have to be asking permission, and we still shouldn't have to ask permission to do what we need to do on the land as Indigenous peoples, whether we are on this side of the border or in the United States,
Mhm.
and good for him. I mean, to be able to um, access and use his rights, and I think there are so many of us still that need to continue to learn as we learn about what our rights are, because there are so many rights that some of us aren't aware of because of colonialism, residential schools. There's that knowledge part that is missing, some of those gaps, and we're starting to find out more about them. But we need to be able to exercise more of our rights that I just don't think some of us are aware of yet.
Well, and I think that's a big issue that you do raise. It's access to justice, and it goes even further than just recognizing our inherent rights. It goes down to just knowing like what you can or cannot do, and what you're entitled to.
Yes.
One of my really good friends is going through a really difficult employment situation, and people don't understand that you have so many rights as an employee. And I don't like, I do want to recognize that our inherent rights are important, but you also have certain inalienable rights as an individual. And a lot of that might be rooted in my identification of my Cree principles, that every individual is important and every individual's perspective matters. And, I think that when we get down to it, when we're exercising our inherent rights, we also have to recognize that we need to protect ourselves, and we need to, again, I'm going to bring it back down to advocate for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, yes. And it really starts with the little ones, raising them up that way, because how we bring them into this world is really going to be a big part of how they carry themselves into the world. On that note, what would you want, maybe, well, Indigenous youth, and also be a little more specific, Indigenous queer youth, to know right now in their lives?
That they are powerful. I think that I think that that's what I would want to hear. Little me would want to hear, but not just queer youth, queer Indigenous youth, but all youth. I want to see and I want to hear more wonderful stories. Like, I'm going to share a little anecdote because I had to babysit my nephew yesterday in between my meetings. I do it all. I'm a little bit a nanny, a little bit a lawyer, all over the place. But I had to babysit him after school yesterday, and he came home, and I was asking him about how his day was, and he was telling me his little buddy, he's a genius. He's just a genius. And literally, that's what he said. He was like, yeah, he's just a genius. I am too, though. And just seeing that, just seeing him stand in his power, and he's 5 years old. I don't want his flame to go out. I want him to remember that. I want all youth, I want queer Indigenous youth to remember that they are powerful, that they can do whatever they want to do. If they want to go out and just be, a scapio, want to be a ceremonial, a lodge holder, go out and do it. That is your purpose.
Yes.
That is your creator given right. And I just want every child to know that they can do it. They can, if I can put my mind to this. I recognize I come from privilege, but I also grew up with, all of those terrible things that society has created to bring us all down. But yet, here we are. And I don't want to say if I can do it, you can do it, because it's not the case for everyone. There are barriers that still plague children to this day. And what I want to drive home to them is that they are powerful, that they can do it. If they want to, I'm in their corner. I will always advocate for them. I will always make sure that they have a place at that table, because they deserve to own that power, to own their identity and be strong nehiyawewin.
Wow, that's so powerful. And wow, yeah, thank you for sharing that beautiful message. And that's what we want, and that's what we need to hear more of. And like I said earlier, coming from ourselves and seeing ourselves represented in media, through the media, and telling our own stories, because who knows your story better than yourself? um yeah, I'm so grateful for everything you're sharing, Brooks. And you are a genius. I want to tell you that. Because,
That's
you are.
my nephew's buddy and my nephew.
I mean, genius keeps good company, as they say. But really, you are a walking history textbook, but you are bringing it to life. It's not just, going to sit on that shelf and get dusty. You're bringing it to life, and not only bringing it to life, you're living it, and you're helping others to see what they can do within their own communities and in their own individual situations. And that's what we need to see. We need to see more of that, and especially in these areas of the law, of justice, because like you said earlier, more than ever, we're at a time where decisions now really need to be made. No more of this, well, back to the drawing board, or we're going to, back to the discussion, so to speak. It's time that Canada starts to not just recognize, but actually put into practice, respect, adhere to, and apply what was taken from us as Indigenous people. And that is sovereignty.
Yeah, and you touch on a really good point. A lot of that respect and that reciprocity and that relationship aspect is rooted in our laws. And when we
Yes.
advocate for getting back to our laws and putting in place our laws, and Canada, not recognizing them, but putting them on that third level, on the same level as common and civil law, because they form a large part of how we relate to each other. They're the foundation for treaty. They're the foundation for our relationship with the Crown. And when we get back to it, we'll start, realizing that our traditional legal mechanisms are Indigenous, and I'm just going to say broadly Indigenous legal mechanisms, but for me, it's nehiyaw legal mechanisms. And then for
Yes.
you, it would be Blackfoot,
Yes.
the Kapi legal principles,
Yeah.
right? And when we get back down to it, it's all how we relate to each other. And once we start relating to each other using these principles that are foundational, we'll start treating each other with more respect. And I think that that's really something that I really want to advocate for in my discussions on exerting that sovereignty, is putting that back in place, because we've lost it. I think, you look around and people are treating each other very terribly. And, social media is causing this. I watched a crazy documentary the other day called The Great Hack, and I highly recommend it. It's on Netflix. And what it really came down to is that our social media, the tool that helps us connect with each other, is actually causing a lot of social ill.
Yes.
And it's really departing from treating each other with kindness, recognizing each other's individuality and respecting that individuality. And when we're talking about recognizing Indigenous legal mechanisms, we're also talking about making sure that we treat each other better. And at the end of the day, if that's all we get from implementing our Indigenous legal mechanisms, would that be so bad? Would it be so bad to start treating each other with respect?
Beautiful. Wow. You're full of all these quotes. I'm just glad this is actually recorded so I can go back and write them down. And I know our listeners are just going to be soaking up all the not only the knowledge you're sharing, Brooks, but the wisdom that you bring to this conversation. First of all, I'm so happy we met, and I was reflecting on, when we met, and for our listeners, Brooks and I bumped into each other. We met at the Calgary Stampede a couple years ago, and we were there with friends, and I believe you were there with some of your other colleague Indigenous lawyers, and we met. I don't remember where exactly, but I know that we just started talking to each other and introducing ourselves. And I always remember how beautiful your spirit was, and just that's why I was immediately wanted to connect with you. And as I was thinking, we were planning, scheduling guests for the podcast. You were one of the first people that came to mind. I thought I need to have him on, and I know that he's really going to help our listeners, especially our non-Indigenous listeners, to really start to grasp and process how important Indigenous sovereignty is in this country. and
Mm-hmm.
how it can be done, more importantly, because we've identified what needs to be done. That's where I go back to when we talk about truth and reconciliation. Really, before reconciliation can happen, we have to understand, well, Canadian society, it's imperative, understands what happened. And it's not the glazing over of, and it's again, having those uncomfortable conversations, and people questioning their assumptions, and really looking at how they were raised in their families and in their communities, and then looking at, well, what is it that, where does my role fit into this? Because they have a role in this. And while we all may not have been here 200 years ago, however, what we do now is just as important as what happened then. And so reconciliation really is having that understanding. This is my perspective anyways, having that, being able to share that history and ensuring our voices are heard, but also for non-Indigenous people in Canada to really hear of what has happened, because that, in order to understand why we are where we are and where we want to go, we have to understand where we were.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, like you said, the reciprocity, relationship, everything in our Indigenous beliefs, is all about relationship, like you talked about, from the beautiful, well, please don't sting me, the wasp flying around,
Yeah.
that we see outside. It's like, to the beautiful water that you drive by or that you put your feet into, the sky, everything is
Mm-hmm.
relationship for us. And I love how you articulated that. And, that's where we can really begin, because until relationship is not honored and not respected, then, reconciliation is not going to happen,
Yeah.
and it happens in small pockets, I'll say too, because, if you think about smaller communities or people who are, working in isolated communities, reconciliation can occur in how they connect with the Indigenous territories that they're on.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell teachers, I share with them, find out where you are. As soon as you start that teaching position, or you're new to the area, or you've lived here for 30 years, find out whose territory you're located in and connect with that community. But yeah, and that's activism in itself for us. What you're doing, Brooks, is activism. It's, one of the other previous guests we had, I believe it was Brandy Morin and also Verna Voker. These two ladies I had a couple of weeks ago on the show both said it. Activism for them isn't necessarily showing up at the protest and participating that way, but it's in the everyday work that they do, as a journalist
Mm-hmm.
and as a teacher, and in your case as a lawyer. That's what our activisms are. It's in our everyday, and we live it. You mentioned that earlier. So anyways, back to just, I'm so happy we've connected, and I just love following your journey, and I know you're going to continue to do so many more amazing things in your life and outside of law as well, because you are really a beautiful spirit, Brooks. And your community is very blessed, and I know they're very proud of you for everything you've done and what you're continuing to do to advocate for your nation.
Mm-hmm. I'm just smiling over here, saying all these really nice things. Holy, thank you. No, it's a labor of love at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to go back to my nation. I was working for MLT Aikens, and decided, I need to go back to my nation. It was always my dream, from going to law school, to go back and serve my nation, and I hope to continue serving it for as long as I can. It is hard work, having. I do also want to highlight, the perils of it too, is a little bit of lateral violence, and that's a large part. We need to have that conversation as well, because a lot of that is rooted in a lot of our traumas. And when
Yes.
people aren't dealing with their traumas, and like I said, I go to therapy to deal with my traumas. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it just perpetuates, and that cycle of violence just continues. Um, I think that was the hardest learning curve for me, was to learn to know how to deal with that. And I've only been with my nation for a year. I was a legal researcher for them for a couple of years. I did some really good work. I got to work on some really interesting files, and I've always had, my heart there. I will never not be proud of where I come from, because it's home. There's a connection that I have to the lands, that I will never shake. I did a stint in Toronto and Ottawa, went to law school in Ottawa. I articled for the Attorney General of Ontario, and that feeling never shook me. I actually worked in your territory, in Treaty 7 territory, and it's still that yearning for the land never went away. It's something that you can't really. I know you feel it, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That deep connection, that blood connection to the land. Like, I'm looking out at these beautiful territories in Montreal, and it I respect it, but I don't have that same connection here that I do back home. And that's
Yes.
really what roots me. And I'm really glad that you keep bringing this concept of knowing where you come from, because you need to know where you come from to know where you're going. And that's always been something that my kukum, my grandmother, has always taught me, is I always need to know where I come from. And I need to know, that my great 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 grandfathers Kastawiskam, who adhered to Treaty 6 on our behalf, and really exercise that jurisdiction. I actually had a really wonderful message that my friend relayed to me from ceremony that was from him. So I'm like, I know I'm doing the work that I was intended to do. My aunties always tell me that I was destined to do this. So, and I think I'm just very lucky that I get to do something that I love.
Gotta listen to the aunties.
Otherwise I get a good slap.
Yes, you were born to do this, and I'm sure that you're going to be part of mentoring other up and coming Indigenous lawyers, and such an exciting journey you're on, and my prayers are with you and your family as well, and for you on the journey that you're on, and for our listeners, just to clarify that Montreal is on the traditional territory of the Mohawk and the Anishinaabe. So I always like to let our listeners know where everybody is, and but I hear you. A little funny story here. I was in a Indigenous Center for Indigenous Theater Summer South program once upon a time ago. And we had the program was based in Peterborough at the Trent University, Peterborough, Ontario. And so me being a Blackfoot, woman, and just appreciate, I love the mountains. I love seeing Chief Mountain is always just a thing for me. And I can never get tired of these views. And then, of course, the beautiful open prairies, and, seeing the horizon. And then when I was out in that program, we had to tell different stories. Each time we'd all sit in a circle, and we all came from different parts of our own territories across the country. And, whenever I would end up talking, somehow the conversation of the mountains would keep coming up, and they would tease me, that I just, I'm always about the mountains, and they're like, "Oh, you're Blackfoot territory," and that good native humor, and
But don't cross the Red Deer River.
hey.
Just kidding.
Oh, that's another one for our listeners. That good Cree Blackfoot rivalry never dies.
Oh my goodness, it's so fun. I send texts to my good Blackfoot girlfriends, and we just always have little jabs, but friendly jabs. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
I would fight for you guys just as hard as I would fight for my people. So, and I've done lots of really interesting files for with the Blackfoot. You guys are deadly, just really strong and powerful, and I just love your people.
Thank you. And I have the same feeling towards you. I have lots of Cree friends, and just, wow.
The best things in life are Cree.
Yeah.
We-
with the side of Blackfoot. Which then brings us to the whole Cree foot thing.
I think my cousin had that.
Yeah. Oh, but yeah, it wasn't that at the time. I believe I was 18 years or 19 years old, and I really, at that time in my life, I didn't really appreciate where I come from. Sometimes you have to go away to appreciate where you come from. And that at
Mhm.
that time in my life, that's when it really occurred. I realized how much I missed home because I was there for a month, and then how much I missed family and just the things you take for granted about where you come from until you go away. So I can relate to you on that. You're enjoying where you are. And that's the fun thing about travel, right? You get to go away and have an adventure, and then you get to go home and, appreciate where all over again where you were from.
Except not during COVID. It's kind of eerie. So I used to do a
Oh,
lot of like
yeah.
plane travel, especially living in Ottawa for law school and working in Toronto,
Yeah.
going back and forth. And I'm so used to air travel, but I think this is the scariest time to travel. I've not been.
Yeah.
I use hand sanitizer. My hands are so dry today from
Yeah.
sanitize all day. I had a mask on through the entire flight. It was
Oh.
horrendous. But
Oh, yeah. That people don't travel right now if you don't have to, okay?
no, stay
That's me and
home.
Brooks' little spiel there.
Essential travel only.
Yeah. And I wear glasses sometimes. So, oh my gosh, wearing them with the masks, it's not fun because you are like fogging up, and that's not a
Mm,
very good fashionable look.
no, not at all. Just have to have little windshield wipers on your glasses.
Oh man, that's a great idea. I need that. Oh. Okay, well, we're going to move into the final four here because that's what we do. And so that's where I get to just ask you four final questions and you just answer the first thing that comes to mind. Are you good with
Oh,
that?
yeah, sounds good.
All right. Okay. And you can't cheat. No textbooks allowed here.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
shake my head, get it all out.
Yes.
All the textbooks.
Okay. So, you mentioned your love for food, and I'm the same. I love food, and we have a very complex relationship, and I have to be careful. But however, I do believe enjoying what I'm going to eat. So,
Mhm.
I've been cooking a lot of good meals because of COVID, right? Being home more so than ever. And so, what is one of your favorite comfort dishes?
Ooh, pizza. I didn't have to
Ooh.
think about that at all. Like pizza, fully pizza.
Is there a certain topping or toppings you like?
Oh, so boring. Pepperoni, green pepper, mushroom. Classic.
Okay,
Ah,
me
boom.
too.
Yeah.
I knew we were destined to be friends. Oh, okay. All right. Next question. Okay, so you see a lot of, the big thing in TV these days lately is like a lot of shows about lawyers, right? Like the good fight and suits, and I
Yeah.
mean the list goes on. Scandal. Do you have a favorite show that you think really represents the fun side of law or just law in itself? Is there a show that you
Uh,
really like?
I'm gonna go for an old school one because I used to watch it when I was little. But Ally McBeal, I tried
Oh
picking
my
it up.
God.
Yeah. I think that's probably I haven't watched it, consecutively. I used to like binge watch it when it was on TV.
Yeah.
And I tried picking it up again when it was on Netflix or Crave or Prime, whatever million
Yeah.
streaming services that I have, and I couldn't pick it up. I couldn't watch it, but I always remember that always being very funny, and it captures the fun side of lawyering that a lot of people don't get to see. I like to. My practice is I like to have fun but I also like to do good work. And
Yes.
one of my colleagues from MLT, uh, I had lunch with her the other day, and she mentioned, she was like, I just miss your spirit around here. Like, you just
Oh,
brought so much fun to the office. And I think that that show really highlights that. It's not all that, like Harvey Specter, or, it's not how to get away with murder. Like, lawyering is quite boring. And, you need to see those quirky people, like the guy who didn't wear shoes around the office in Alley,
yeah. Oh,
or
yeah.
Field
Richard or George, one of them.
George, yeah, George. But like that, it shows the quirky side of lawyering, because at the end of the day, we have to remember we're all people. Like, lawyers are people. We're not any
Mm.
better or any different than anybody else off the street. Like, we are just we just got called to the bar. That's it.
Yeah. And people's lives rest in your hands.
Well, yeah, also that, yeah, obviously, also that. Just minor.
Just saying. Oh, wow. Yes. Oh my God. I love that show. Yes. Me and my sister watched it in high school. That was the show we really didn't want to miss. We were like
Yeah,
busy with sports in school, but my parents allowed us to like stay up later to watch that and just like, yeah.
and that was before PVRs. Remember? Like,
Yes,
you
exactly.
have to watch it in real time.
Yeah. We're so spoiled now with everything.
Mhm.
But yeah, and I love their bathroom scenes, and that's when I became a Barry White fan, by the way, for the record.
Ooh.
Yeah. We could have a whole episode on this, Brooks, but
Oh yeah, they had that whole like the Barry White. Oh, I can't do the song. Like, you play the Barry White song right now, and then we're sitting in the
Yeah.
bathroom. Oh yeah, good times.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so if you weren't a lawyer, what do you think you would be doing?
I think I'd be an actor. I was really drawn to it. I think a lot of it came down to my insecurities, though, and I think that that's what I would be if I got over it. If I had my uh, my I guess my no, I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to say pride, but my confidence. There we go. If I had my confidence that I have now, I would definitely be an actor. Maybe I might be. Who knows? Maybe I'll switch.
I could see that. Harvey Specter, move over.
Never mind, Callista Flockhart, Ally McBeal.
I could see that, Brooks. You know that. And I'm not just saying that to be polite. I'm being real here. I can see you doing that because you just have that voice, first of all, and you have that personality, and you've got a good look for it. So,
Ooh, thank you.
yeah.
The best things in life are Cree, like I said.
Uh huh. I love it. Oh, okay. Final four question here. What do you want future Brooks to know?
Hmm. Pay your bills. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I want future Brooks to know. Wow, this is a hard question. This is it's like an aspirational one. Um, I want him to know that I've done everything that I needed to do. Whether that means that I've accomplished something, or whether I, set my mind to something to finish. I just want myself to know that I did a good job. You know, that's, I think, at the end of the day, all I can tell myself in the future. That it's not like I tried my best, but I gave it my all, because I do. I give it my all every day, and that I can be proud of that and feel very confident that I did a really good job, because I think I do. And I think I'm a pretty good lawyer. So,
Wow. Yes. Yes to all of that. I mean, and your future self will be proud of you. And And yeah, you are a one of a kind, and the career of law is very fortunate to have a voice like you, because you bring so much insight to the table with your Indigenous and your Cree perspectives, but also as a person, as a human being. There's so much, so many wonderful, beautiful attributes about you as a whole, and
You.
I know that your future self will be thanking you, for the choices that you made now that led you to where you're going.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Hopefully, I can buy a house. Land back, land back.
Yes. Oh, beautiful. Wow, this is I'm so just inspired here, Brooks, and you've got me thinking about things even more differently, just about the whole process of natural law and um, you know um, our rights and accessing our rights. And I'm going to be looking into things a little deeper here too myself, and I know that our listeners will as well, and they'll also be reflecting on their own understandings and their own curiosities and their own assumptions about Indigenous law and also Indigenous histories in
Mhm.
Canada. And I just feel grateful for everything you shared. And I want to give you a hug, so I'll give you a virtual hug.
It's COVID safe. And
Yeah.
also, not just the histories and the wonderful things you just said, but also just recognizing our power too. Like going back
Yes.
to the message I want to drive home to the youth, but just also recognizing our power and our sovereignty and our ability to
Mm,
just exercise that.
yes. Power, sovereignty, ability. You heard it from the man himself. The best things in life are Cree.
That way. Uh,
Oh, okay. Well, hand to heart here in Blackfoot, we say nitik dak, which means, I thank you with my spirit and, the value of gratitude I have for you. So thank you, Brooks.
Naskamot. Aye, aye. Thank you.
Brooks Arcand-Paul is a name that we are going to continue to hear about, because he is creating change. He is part of the change that is dismantling colonialism, genocide, and everything that Indigenous people continue to endure from the time of our ancestors to 2020. I'm so glad that I got to have this amazing conversation with Brooks, because he not only reminded me of some very important processes that are happening in the legal systems, but also the power that we all hold within ourselves, and to always remember to be true to who we are. And Brooks, I just want to give a shout out to him, because he truly is an advocate for many Indigenous voices, as well as people who are looking to find their own empowerment within themselves, to overcome, and not only to survive, but to thrive. I'm so proud of Brooks, and I know his community is. And I can't wait to see what he continues to do. And we all have his back. And there are so many Indigenous lawyers out there alongside Brooks who are creating this change that has been so necessary and deeply needed for so long. And it is time. It is time for Canada to wake up and to listen and to respect Indigenous peoples as human beings and as the first peoples of this land. Brooks truly is living up to the honor of his great great grandfather and all those that have come before him who have taught him his traditional ways. I just want you all to know that we have a long ways to go, but we are on our way, and this is not the end of it. And as you know, hearing from Brooks in my conversation, we can all do something, and it all starts with ourselves, whether you are Indigenous or non-Indigenous. And whether you want to be a true ally, that means to truly listen, to truly become aware, to understand, and to respect Indigenous peoples and Indigenous voices. There's no better person to advocate for ourselves than ourselves, as Brooks shared in the conversation here. What a lovely and beautiful, bright spirit he is. I just enjoyed this conversation so much, and I look forward to seeing everything that comes his way along his journey in his path, and more importantly, seeing how he is truly living his purpose and his passion, and the way that it connects to advancing the way that Indigenous peoples are treated in this country. There's lots to think about, lots to reflect on, and think about our own assumptions and how many injustices Indigenous peoples have faced and continue to encounter. But as we heard from Brooks, we are no longer going to be silenced. The systems that were meant and created to destroy us are being dismantled. And we are rising back to who we truly are and who we are meant to be as the strong warriors of our ancestors and as our spirits. Thank you so much to Brooks, hand to heart, for sharing all of your knowledge. What a truly smart warrior man he is. Gadakiramatsin.